Alright, I was finally able to find it and get it loaded up. So, the reason I'm showing this illustration is just to show you kind of what sort of things you can do with layers. So, everything in this picture, almost everything, has its own base layer, and then what I did was add the shading and highlights to that base layer. So I went over like 120 or so layers for this. Let me see if I can find just find her face or maybe her dress or something to show you guys how it all works. Now, it looks a little messy, but I have everything kind of organized into folders here. So everything in the background is in its own folder, so if I click the eyeball I can hide all of that. And then everything in the foreground here is too. So let me see. Boot, legs. So here we can look at the blue of her armor. Let's look at that. So everything on her armor here is on its own layer. But I started with everything that was blue. I painted those layers separately. And then used a grouped layer to do the shadows and the parts that are light. So this is a good way to just kind of get everything grouped, and then, you know, if you pay attention to your grouping names and all of that, and make sure that you're naming everything, it's easy to keep track of where everything is too. So if I have a name, Armor Blue, I know that's my base layer, and then I have my shadow layer on top of it. So I'm not expecting everyone to do something quite as complete as what my illustration was. I think it's good to know what opportunities are available to you using Photoshop. So now that I'm done with the face, I would just move on to doing other parts of the body. If I wanted to do the shirt, for example, create a new layer, we'll call it Shirt Base, and get my paintbrush tool, and then I just start filling it in. So let me do that real quick. Now, one nice thing here is you can see that the face layer is above the shirt layer. So even if I, color all the way up into here, it's behind the face. So you can use that to your advantage too. Having the layers positioned where they are can let you be a little more messy, I guess, in certain areas, because it'll be covered by other layers. Anyway, I'll just take a minute and finish filling this in. One other option I haven't really talked about, if you really were comfortable with the pen tool during first quarter, you can use pen tool shapes to make your base color layers. So in the interest of just showing that, I'm going to make the shirt using the pen tool and then shade on top of it. Now, one cool thing I can do here now is use grouped layers. Now, if you remember back to the pen tool, if I try to color directly on it, it will tell me the content of the layer is not directly editable. And that's because, if you remember, pen tool shapes are called vector shapes. They stay the same resolution no matter how big that you make them. But I can color on it by creating a new layer and grouping, and it works exactly the same way as we talked about with shading on the face. Now I can take that group layer, pick a darker blue, lower my opacity, choose a softer brush, and again I can add shadows, and even though it's a vector shape, because I'm using a grouped layer, it will only stick to that. So that's the basics of just kind of coloring everything in and adding some shadows. Just remember, use references if you can. Find a picture if you need to work from. The internet's your friend in this situation. And the last thing you need to do for your illustration, once you've got your characters or shapes or whatever it's going to be in the background, you got to add your text. So whatever it is, that thing that you wish you had known on your first day of 5th or 6th grade. You can see my text is too big. So I'm going to start right away by changing the font size. Make sure that when you're doing this, you're picking a font that's easy to read and that'll stand out well against your drawing. Pick a color that's going to stand out. So for this one, I'm just going to call it, I wish I had known where the lunchroom was. What I would like you to do, first off, is select your text, and whatever your sentence or a couple of sentences are, make sure and click this. That'll center the text in the text box that's created by your typing. My computer's going to be difficult for a second here, so we'll give it a second. I just want you to center the text so that it's right, it centers it within the text box that you made. The other thing I want you to do is center it in the image. First, I want to make sure that's on top of my drawing. So your text should be the very top layer in the layers panel. Pick a color that's going to stand out well from the background. Go with black. And I'm going to pick a font that's a little less like a punch in the face here. Okay, I think Century Gothic will work. The last thing I want you to do is make sure it's centered left to right inside your workspace. So if you press Control T while you're on the text layer, it will bring up these X and Y coordinates. And what these are the position of whatever layer you have selected in the workspace. Our workspace is going to be 3000 pixels wide, so if we change this X coordinate to 1500, it will be dead center in the middle, and that's what we want. So I'm going to change that to 1500 and hit enter, and that way I know that my text now is directly in the center of my workspace, and that way it will be directly in the center of your page, whatever your page is finished. So hopefully that gives you a kind of a good introduction to how to start your illustration and kind of the tips and tricks to add some shadows, get your text in the right place. I'll have one more video about this, just kind of going over the rubric, and that'll be it. So good luck, and if you have any questions, I'll be around. I'll see you guys in class.